Donald Trump's in a lot of trouble. His economic numbers are disastrous, and the war in Iran is going terribly. So here comes the Democrats to the rescue. They have somehow found a way to be as unpopular as the Republicans. And this story we're about to tell you about the DNC shows you some of the reasons why. I think it's actually complicated. I'm going to show you both sides of this story, but first, let's look at the incompetence.
Boo, don't both sides it, boo. Okay, all right, I'm kidding. It's good, fairness is good. The Dems are a nightmare, and I'm just talking about the establishment under the leadership of a specific person who seems to be struggling, to say the least. So, as Dems stare down what should be a very easy victory in the 2026 midterms, there have been some major questions about the party's leadership. So the party has hemorrhaged so much money that the Democratic National Committee put its physical headquarters up for collateral last year in order to obtain a $15 million line of credit to help invest in off-year elections. And that's according to DC deed records not previously reported. A majority of this criticism lands at the feet of the DNC chair, Ken Martin. In fact, confidence in Martin's leadership has been shaky ever since it was reported that he literally cried on a private Zoom call with David Hogg, who suggested that the DNC primary the do-nothing Democrats, God forbid. Now, later, according to the New York Times, trust in Martin among donors and party officials was sapped by his handling of a long-promised autopsy of the 2024 election. We all remember that, right? So late last year, he said he would not release the document, but as criticism mounted, he relented in May and released an incomplete draft that featured searing annotations from the DNC that undermined the report. And then after a disastrous appearance on Pod Save America to discuss the autopsy itself, Martin has basically been keeping a low profile, which is true. Like, I haven't really noticed much reporting about Ken Martin until very recently when we learned about how much debt the DNC is in and how he has lost support. People don't really feel much confidence in his leadership. So according to sources close to the Democratic National Committee, he has grown increasingly paranoid that he might be ousted from his current position, which he was elected to hold all the way through 2029. Now, earlier this month, Martin hit a breaking point and threw a phone at a junior aide.
No, not at the aide, at the table by the aide.
Okay, so look, you and I are both known to be hot-blooded, okay? And I don't apologize for that, okay? I'm a passionate woman. However, I would never, it wouldn't even cross my mind to grab any object and throw it anywhere in a professional setting, in a place of work. Like, can these people please stop doing this? Whether it's Amy Klobuchar, like, don't throw your phone.
Nah, this is one of my defenses of him. There are people, and overall, he has not been good. So don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to buck him out. I'm just trying to be honest with you guys. That place is leaking like a sieve. Every potential slightly negative thing about him immediately gets into the papers. There are clearly opponents inside the DNC. By the way, they're not progressives, they're establishment people, okay? They want someone even more pro-corporate, more establishment, and they're trying to get every piece of dirt to the press, and the press is eating it up, okay? So keep that in mind. It doesn't mean he's doing a good job. We'll tell you all the things he's doing actually wrong in a second. But when I read a story, it becomes obvious that there's an attempt at getting a guy. So later in the story, they clarify he didn't throw the phone at the guy. He threw the phone down, and then it got painted as throwing a phone in a general direction. So when I see that, I go, oh, wait a minute, we got a bias here, right? So,
okay, fair.
Like, I just ignore the phone thing. I think it's totally BS.
Okay, fair. And look, I have in my notes that it has been disputed how aggressively that whole situation played out. I don't even care. You're right, I don't care. But I just think it's a bad idea to grab any object and manipulate it in an aggressive fashion when you're in the middle of a conflict, okay?
If that's what happened.
If that's what happened, okay. So moving off of that, because I think brazen mishandling of the funds the DNC had is telling. So In expressing his concerns to staff and basically bemoaning the sheer amount of leaks that are coming out from his office, Martin said, quote, "My success is your success. So the weaker I am, the weaker all of you are." But donors are concerned, and those concerns are not just limited to Martin's behavior. So now we get into the finances of the Democratic Party. Total disaster. These people, I mean, it's just like it feels like politics has increasingly become a money laundering scheme, but
oh, definitely.
Right?
Yes.
Okay, so let me give you the details on this. The Democratic Party and its allies are far behind Republicans when it comes to money. Trump controls a $400 million super PAC, and the Republican National Committee is sitting on nearly $130 million. Martin's DNC is $2 million in debt. So let me just remind you all that in the last presidential election, Kamala Harris outraised Trump by a lot. Okay, so she had raised $1.5 billion, which, I mean, it's hard to even fathom the amount of money, but she ended her campaign in debt. So she wasn't even able to provide, leftover funds to the Democratic National Committee. I think her campaign was $20 million in debt. Anyway, fast forward to today, and you're dealing with the Democratic National Committee that's $2 million in debt, whereas the Republicans have obviously raised a lot more money. Now, I give you that example of Kamala Harris outraising Trump because I don't want anyone to be under the impression that well, yeah, of course, Republicans have a much easier time raising money because they're greedy and corporations love them and they fund them. No. Corporate interests fund both parties. They want both parties to be their cattle, okay, to serve them as opposed to the people. So, I mean, Democrats haven't had a hard time raising money. It's just that they spend money on consultants that give them really bad advice so they can lose elections, okay?
Yeah. See, there's so much nuance in this story because the Democrats are not having as much trouble raising for their congressional arms, the House re-election committees and the Senate re-election committees. And why is that? It gets to the core of the problem with the DNC, which is they haven't made up their mind. Are they grassroots or are they corporate, right? Like they've been acting corporate all throughout, but they apparently, like the big super PACs, et cetera, and the corporate PACs are still a little displeased because they're not exactly sure which way the DNC is going to go. Whereas they are giving a lot to Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer because they know that those guys are going to serve them.
100%.
Right? So it's an ironic kind of complaint against the DNC that the PACs aren't giving them as much money because they're not as sure that the DNC is corrupt, whereas they can take Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer's corruption to the bank.
100%.
And in fact, you saw Hakeem Jeffries just found just enough votes to get Israel the vote that they needed on the National Defense Authorization Act and the merging of our military technologies.
Yeah, 6 Democrats voted in favor of merging our military with the IDF. So that was in the House vote.
Yeah, and they needed that number, otherwise that vote would have lost. The Democrats would have won, and Democrats.
Yeah.
But the Democratic leadership is so corrupt, they make sure that they lose each one of those votes. So this article should be written about them and how incompetent not incompetent, honestly, on the other side. They're not even Democrats, they're lying to you.
They're corrupt, absolutely. Also, new financial reports released this week revealed the depth of the DNC's financial hole. The party is $2 million in debt, while the Republican National Committee has $128.5 million in cash on hand. The party that holds the White House almost always raises more money into its coffers, but this year's chasm is extraordinarily large. At least that was how the New York Times framed it. Now, DNC financing is not just for the midterms, but are also used to kind of lay the foundation for the 2028 presidential election. And in a panicked meeting with Senator Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries from the House of Representatives, of course, to combat the dwindling financing, basically, this is what happened. Inside the room, Martin described a proposal in which much of the cash raised through this mega committee, which would include state parties nationwide, would be routed first through his committee before being distributed to the congressional party arms. I hate all of this, and Cenk will decode it all for us in just a second, okay? At least some involved saw the move as a bid to inflate the fundraising figures of Martin's struggling committee and to take credit for cash transfers he could not otherwise afford. So how did the DNC even get into this devastating position to begin with? Why are they in debt? What's going on here? Well, the answer actually lies in the overall mishandling of the 2024 election. As the New York Times points out, some of the problems are a hangover from 2024. While Vice President Kamala Harris raised record sums that year, her loss left many big Democratic donors disillusioned with the party. Her campaign has also had millions in debt that the DNC spent much of last year paying off with Harris's help. That was $20 million in debt, by the way. And the single biggest expense in the Martin era was $7.3 million to buy the remnants of Harris's campaign list from her failed 2024 bid. Harris's Political Action Committee used the money to cover additional remaining debts. $7.3 million for a list.
Yeah, so they raise off that list, and so maybe you could make your money back off of the money, like off of a giant list like that. So I know how the mechanics of that works. But guys, so this was a surprisingly balanced story out of the New York Times. So let me give you the things they explained that were in favor of Ken Martin. Then I want to get to my main criticism of him. Okay, so number one, they explained they've actually raised more than they did in 2018. So wait, what's the whole point of this article then? Well, they say, well, we're not sure where the money went. Well, no, you explain where the money went. It went to Kamala Harris's old campaign. And so that was certainly a huge part of it. And so should they have done that? I don't know, maybe they shouldn't have, and they probably put a lot of pressure on him. Maybe that was Kamala Harris's problem and not the current Democratic voters' problem, right? So it's not, the fundraising is less of a problem than the expenses, apparently according to that fact, but there are other facts in Ken Martin's direction. When he was the head of the Democrats in Minnesota, they did not lose a statewide election for 14 years, and the New York Times explains all this, okay? So that's a pretty impressive record. He has been empowering the state parties, and as progressives, we wanted state parties to be empowered, including red states. So he's not giving up on the red states. In fact, in Mississippi, the Republicans had a supermajority, but Ken Martin put money in to try to change that, and it worked. And now the Republicans don't have a supermajority in the Mississippi state legislature anymore. So he has done some positive things that should be noted if we're being honest about this conversation. Now to the main criticisms. There's little smaller things like, yeah, they're combining the party's fundraising accounting to make it look like they raised more money. That's kind of cheesy. It's a relatively small thing, but still cheesy. But he's got to make up his mind. Brother, are you gonna raise from the grassroots? Mm-hmm. And if you do that, by the way, Bernie has raised what, over $250 million in 2 different presidential elections. It's not like you can't do that. AOC is a fundraising machine.
You just have to have a message.
And you have to actually believe it, and you have to fight for it. Or are you going to be a weaker corporate PAC entity than the Democrats in the House and the Senate? In which case you're not going to raise that much money. He's half jumping off a cliff, and that's a terrible idea. And honestly, he's being super weak. He's constantly worried about like, oh, are they out to get me? Who's gonna get me? What am I gonna do? How do I appease that? How do I appease that? Right, both sides. Brother, you can't appease both sides. You've gotta make a decision, and you've gotta act strong. And if you go try to inch over to the corporate PAC side, they're just gonna crush you, and they're gonna write articles generally framed as you're incompetent, etc. And if you're not raising enough money and you haven't gone grassroots, they're gonna have a case.
Yeah.
And then eventually they'll replace you, and they'll bring in a guy who's even more establishment, more in favor of corporate PACs and corruption.
More obsessed with losing, really.
Yeah, so if I'm counseling him, which I'm not, but if I was, I'd tell him, look man, buck up. Let's go, make a decision. And if you're gonna be a corporate stooge, just be a corporate stooge. It's not gonna break our heart. It's the DNC. It's been run by corporate stooges my whole life, right? And then we're done with you, but the corporate PACs will give you more money, and that's a decision that a direction you can go. Or lean into the people and have the cojones to fight against the Chuck Schumers and the Hakeem Jeffries and the rest of the corrupt Democrats and go, no, we're gonna support our voters. And not only are we gonna raise more money that way, but on top of that, We're actually gonna give people something to vote for and to be excited about.
Yep.
Can you imagine having a DNC that's honest and on our side?
I actually can't.
I know, I was gonna say it's actually unimaginable.
I've never experienced it.
But if you went in that direction, even if they eliminated you, you would have done something heroic. And instead of this waffling, wishy-washy nonsense, that's getting you hammered anyway.
Yeah, it's total beta energy. We don't want that.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.